uplifting study. Yes, it is. It actually is. There's some gospel in it as well, but it is a video series. And once I get it queued up correctly, and turn this on. That'll probably be good. Okay, so it's wanting to freeze right now. So, how are you all today?
Well, I'm freezing with some slaw and potato salad.
Great. Thank you. That one. Okay, there we go. Yes.
My sister won't let me sleep in. Sorry.
That's me, your mother.
Right. And I just remembered I forgot the speaker, so I will do that.
Baby sister.
That's good. Looking out for you.
While he's running upstairs, let me tell you what we told you. We went to Washington as part of our 50th anniversary trip with children and had a great time. Just took the grandchildren. We were talking about a baseball game. It was about 100 and something degrees in the 4 o'clock game. You know, those are going to be hot games. Coming home, we caught a taxi, and a very nice-looking gentleman in there, but he looked as if he was from the Middle East, and we got in a wonderful, there were 4 of us, so 3 in the back, I was up front, we got a wonderful discussion about God, religions, and what we, you know, and I said, it's just terrible that you and other people get wrapped in. I said, we have the same thing, that it could, shootings or something like that, people that do that, but we all, that's why then our whole denomination and our whole civilization almost gets blamed, and you're getting a lot of blame for what 1% or low are doing at that system. Go by Embassy Road and by the mosque. Which I have been around and by and beside it. He said they would welcome. I said, so I bet that's beautiful inside. He said, you welcome anybody to come in. He said, somebody will greet you and they'll take you around and show you and discuss. So I did. The next Friday, that Friday, 2 days later, I just walked up to the door and sure enough, I was greeted and just what we said, sat down with not the imam, but with an associate who we got a wonderful discussion again about my beliefs, their beliefs, and variations. And I'm trying to talk about that alone. It reminded me, you know, the wording wasn't all the same in the site of our creeds or something. Yeah. There were amazing number of similar sentences and beliefs about God. Of course, they do not. You know, there's one God. You know, they don't, the Trinity, of course, is not worked there. But and then we stayed in there and just looked around. You talking about each part of that building. I thought that was just really. We were left, of course, we were taking our shoes off, coming in, putting the shoes back on, and an old fellow walked up, who was the imam of the Washington Mosque. He and I, again, standing on the front steps, had another 10, 15-minute conversation. And he again told me about their belief in God. I'm getting kicked, which means I'm cutting off his time. But I just wanted to, it was just, almost like an amazing experience.
I bet.
To go through those conversations and comparisons and see.
Absolutely.
Just, he was, Ryman was quite a call.
He impacted them as well.
All right.
I apologize.
No, it's fine.
The town of al-Baghdadi falling into the hands of ISIS, the Iraqi army evaporates.
This as the terror group gained ground in Anbar province, some predicting a collapse of the area within hours.
ISIS forces was attacking Mosul. Thousands of civilians, religious minorities fleeing an onslaught of violence. Civilians start to be in the highway.
We watch horrific images of Christians being beheaded, slaughtered, their throats slit.
When they took me from the highway by gun and they put the rope in my eyes and chained me for 9 days.
ISIS claims its militants are still on the streets of Tikrit.
ISIS have crucified your man in Syria.
Still, there's this suspension of belief that would ever come here.
They hit Christian especially. We don't know why.
These are not unfamiliar images. We hear about violence against Christians in other parts of the world, especially countries like Iraq. Jesus warned us that this would happen. If they persecuted me, he said, they will also persecute you. And yet the kind of violence that Christians experience in Iraq is practically unheard of here in the West. If you claim to belong to Jesus, then the people you'll meet in this series are your family. They're your parents, your brothers, your sisters. Why on earth are they willing to endure such sacrifice for the sake of Jesus? What's so great about Jesus that makes their sacrifice worth it?
When the N gets painted on your house in Mosul, then you're marked. N stands for the word Nasara. It's the Arabic word meaning Nazarene. It's the way Christians are identified in the Quran. So ISIS was using this to mark the Christians, to drive them out of Mosul. We went to Iraq to be with them, to see how we could help, to understand their stories. One brother we met that way was Nassim.
My name is Nassim Samir Mati, and I am from Nineveh, Mosul. Married to Anwar and have 2 children, a boy and a girl, Nancy and Norman. I owned a grocery store, and my wife is a housewife. We lived a normal life of work in the store and other work at home.
ISIS forces, they was attacking Mosul, and there was a big fight between them and the Iraqi army for 5 days.
Kareem is a pastor from Mosul. He was driven out along with everyone else, so he himself was a victim of the violence. But he's a pastor, and he's continued to shepherd his church after being driven out.
The 5th day, the Iraqi army left everything and ran away.
When the army fled, there were no authorities left in the city. Police joined ISIS or laid down their weapons as well. With no one to resist them, ISIS was able to come in and purge the city of everyone who disagreed with them. But Christians were especially targeted, either killed or driven out.
The ISIS come in the night, about 3 or 4 a.m. A lot of bombing and shooting.
They took over our town. They wrote none for Nasrani over my house and my store as a sign that we are Christians.
Just like the Nazis marked the property of Jews, Christian homes in Mosul have been marked with this red symbol. It's the Arabic letter N for Nasara, an early Islamic term for Christians.
And they told them, now, either you pay tax, or either like you donate, or like you give us like one of your daughters, like or girls for the jihad, or you turn to Islam.
There's no one caring what's happening. They kill people, they kidnap, they rape people, and no one cares. Our government don't care.
I've seen a few videos of the ISIS attacks because I wanted to actually like get to know about what's happening. And it was kind of a shock because I didn't know it was that bad.
State, or ISIS, stormed into Iraq's second largest city, Mosul, last summer and took control. From there, it pushed into the neighboring villages and towns across this region, known as the Nineveh Plain.
An idol threat. It's real. They release footage of them killing them. Tell them, you're next.
Then we took our things, only clothes, and then we flee to this place.
Okay, when the Christians were driven out, and this is tens of thousands of people, it's 100 degrees. They begin this journey with nothing but the clothes on their back. They've lost all their possessions, all their money, and they're walking. And you think of the families, children, the elderly. They begin this journey walking in the heat and the difficulty. We found them in the city of Erbil and surrounding areas, sleeping in parks on the side of the road, coming to churches, really anywhere people could go, hungry, thirsty, and the threat of ISIS was very much at hand.
Thousands of them like are everywhere. People were laying down in the streets. People like everywhere in the city, like in the parks. They were longing for a roof just to stay under it, for like they're longing for food, to eat and to water to drink, because they had no money, nothing.
When the Bible says we present our bodies a living sacrifice, that's something great to read. I mean, we read it, but I think they were actually doing it.
These people, these Christians, they're our family. So when we saw them in this situation, we started to provide them with food, clothing, shelter. We brought them supplies who were donated to the Voice of the Martyrs and prepared by volunteers at our ministry. As I met with the people and as I provided them with aid, the thought kept going through my mind. Each of them had a choice. They could have kept their future, their homes, all their possessions, but they chose to sacrifice them instead of denying Christ.
This life that I have, it's not anymore belong to me. It's belong to Christ, belong to Jesus. I have given all my life to him, and he's using me in incredible ways. So really, when I think about it, even in these days when I'm facing difficulties, when I get caught by police, nothing is affecting me. Nothing can stop me from what I'm doing, because I know that he's protecting me.
Well, I used to be a pastor in my church in Mosul, and I'm doing the same thing. I'm taking care of my church members, and we are doing refugee work, relief to displaced people. There is major need for places to live. There's some people live in unfinished buildings, unfinished houses, doors.
When people fled to Erbil and other places, they were on the ground, they were in parks, They were in church meeting halls. They were anywhere. So as soon as we could, we started putting them in partially constructed buildings, people's homes, churches, really anywhere we could to give them some shelter. And they were packed. Everything you can imagine, from an awning to a fellowship hall, completely full of people, just to get them out of the sun, just to get them a place to sleep in.
And this is the day God has given us to work and to help and to reach the people out for Jesus Christ and tell them there is a God who loves you and cares for you and will never forsake you.
There was a desperation for survival, but even more for that, I saw a hunger for God, people reaching out to Him.
The people are open for Jesus. When we talk about with anyone now, share the gospel with them, you can see a response. Before that, the people are busy with their life, but now they are coming by themselves to the church. Asking for prayer, they're asking for help, they're asking to know Jesus better.
There's something true about God. People often draw closer to God during times of need than in times of blessing. When God brought the Israelites into the desert for 40 years, He told them, when you get to the promised land, you will forget me. In the suffering of our persecuted family, we see once again many people drawing closer to God. After all, where else is there to turn?
People are coming to Christ, even from non-Christian. He himself decided to leave the heaven and to be here on earth and to be as a Jesus Christ, incarnated in Jesus Christ willingly, and to be here and to the way of the cross, and so to give salvation to everybody. So I would say, like, willingly, I'm staying here. I believe God has called me here to be in Iraq, and I believe at the same time I am called to suffer with the Christ.
If I die, I die for Christ. If death is a gain, we finish from the suffering of this world. That's the real faith. It goes back to see, do I honestly believe that there is heaven? Do I honestly believe that Christ is alive, waiting for me?
But I think it's important to note the difference between a sacrifice and a loss. If something is lost, it's just completely gone. But I think whenever you talk about sacrifice, the word sacrifice implies that you're actually gaining something.
You know, we experience here 6 months too many of God's promises, letting us lost. He's not gonna let us be hungry or in need.
And so I think that we are encouraged to be able to sacrifice, to willingly give up something valuable, to willingly give up our own lives with the expectation, the promise that we gain Christ, and that's everything.
God always opens doors, even if we do not see Him. He sends people our way and tells them we are in need. Even if we do not see Him, He sends help.
And He's taking care of every single small thing in their life.
We left our homes having nothing, and we lost everything. But we did not lose our faith in Christ Jesus.
In the midst of all the suffering, we've seen that God's doing a wonderful thing. People are open to the gospel like never before. Those of us in the Frontier Missions community, Frontier missionaries, who've been working in the region for decades and studying it all along since the advent of Islam, we've never seen an openness to the gospel like there is right now among Muslims.
To tell you the truth, it is something really beautiful. It is something really enjoyable, like you enjoy to suffer with the Christ. You enjoy like you are not a nominal Christian. You enjoy you are not Christian by name. You're not Christian by identification card. You're Christian by faith. You're Christian by behaviors. You're Christian by words. You're Christian by everything. And this is the beauty of being, a Christian.
Did you consider sacrifice to be part of the deal when you decided to follow Jesus? Is this the life we signed up for? Said that he presented himself a living sacrifice for the sake of the gospel. Would they paint the inn on your house, your apartment, your dorm room? Would you say, I am in?
All right. So papers are being passed. While they are getting to you, and after they get to you, take a few minutes and just reflect on what went through your mind while you watched this video. What are your reactions? What are your emotions? What do you think? What do you feel? Write it down, but if not, just think. I'll give you a few minutes to do that. So what are your thoughts, feelings, reactions? Does anybody want to share?
Wondering actually how we would respond if it in his life.
Very good question. Right. We'll talk about some of that.
I'm just wondering when it takes place. It's got to be after Mosul can take it back.
Say again.
We're talking about all this happening when the ISIS took over most. And there's no other authority but ISIS. How are they getting help in there? That's still the same way.
These people are no longer in Mosul. They are now in yeah. So that's why they're out in the streets and that's because they're refugees. They've fled to other areas that are not under ISIS. Right. The stories that they're telling take place before, but but all the filming and all that stuff.
Well, I have a question about the martyrs that we kept hearing. Iraq.
Sure.
Where does that organization originate?
That's a good question. I'm not absolutely sure where Voice of the Martyrs originates.
Because they're obviously Western Christians.
Yes.
Certainly. So they I feel like they're a group.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, absolutely.
And I wrote down, how did they get to Mosul? And did somebody send them as a missionary group or?
Right. Well, it sounds like several of them were already involved in missionary work in the Middle East, and that Voice of the Martyrs, in particular, when they heard everything that was going on, sent in aid, sent in relief, that sort of stuff, for all of these refugees, and to kind of alleviate the.
It made me want to go put some stuff together.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because they all had it packed up in those Ziploc things, those big Ziploc compression.
We'll get to talking about some practical stuff too.
My thought is about the children, that they just can't understand what is happening.
Right.
And their parents used to provide them with happier times than what's happening now. And yet they're still too young to understand what faith is.
Right.
And what a struggle it is for the parents to get this open to these children.
Right. And to just, it's hard enough taking care of children normally. Imagine, when you're in a tent or even, you're on the street. What are you going to do?
No, they still look at it. The parents are succeeding in some ways, but what a struggle.
So some interesting things, but it's part of the equation that Jim brought up. If my family is on the line, what am I actually going to do? All right. So I guess the first question is, why should we care?
We're our family. We're our brothers, our sisters.
They hit that kind of hard. Why are they our brothers and sisters?
All our children are human.
Well, they're human. Yeah, they're suffering. Right. But these people in particular are also brothers and sisters in Christ. And the persecution they're receiving is because they are Christian. So that's an added on top of that as well.
We continue to hear the verses that talk about it. Christ knows the hair on your head and all these others. Cares for mosquitoes.
Right, yeah.
That gets it all the way down, doesn't it? Everything top to bottom. A bird does not fall. God is not aware. Christ is not aware.
And part of that is God knows all this, and He works, like the gentleman was saying at the end. God brings people into contact with us that want to help and do different things. Look up John 1:43 through 46, and would someone read that?
I have.
All right.
The next day, Jesus decided to go to Galilee. He found Philip and said to him, "Follow me." Now Philip was from Bethsaida, the city of Abraham and Peter. Philip found Nathanael and said to him, when he found him, about whom Moses in the law and also the prophets wrote, Jesus, son of Joseph, of Nazareth. And did anything good come out of Nazareth? Philip said to him, "Come and see."
That's good. So, yeah, exactly. Well, it's very much the same sort of thing, right? Or maybe even further north. Right. Yeah. Right. No, that's kind of the cultural point, that is our assumptions about those people up there, maybe damn Nazarenes, right? They have a different way of life. They're kind of like us, but not quite. They're different enough that we're not so sure about those people. And yet, we know that part of the prophecy about Jesus is that he would be called a Nazarene. It was a different. There's a funny play on, but anyways. So Nathaniel asked, can anything good come from Nazareth? He almost missed Christ because of where he came from and all that sort of stuff. But that's a whole different lesson. The Nazarene. When we watched AD, the Bible continues, we heard about Jesus referred to as the Nazarene. And I think one of the reasons the writers kind of hit that hard was there's some historical accuracy, but also that's going on. So the N, the Nun. Did you catch what that stood for? Yeah.
I am a Christian. I've been labeled by the government, and I stand by it.
Or government, or mob, or your neighbor, or something. It stands for their word for the Nazarene, those who follow the Nazarene. So this is, so they'll mark businesses, mark houses, and say, okay, this person, when people come in, or depending on what kind of the culture in the area is, it's kind of generally accepted. That person can be roughed up a little bit because
the Jewish symbol is the best comparison.
it's very, very simple. Yeah, I mean, it's just a market. All right, here you go. So when the Gestapo comes in, says we're clearing this place out with all the Jews, they already know which ones they are. Same thing when ISIS comes in, all the Christians are, because it's already been marked. It's not the ISIS army coming in and marking things. This is friends and neighbors and people who are sympathetic to ISIS's cause, and they say we're going to mark. So, what would it be like to make that decision? To have to choose between I'm going to keep my stuff and the life that I know, the house that I have, the business that I have, the safety I have for my children, or faith in Jesus Christ. Oh my goodness. Yeah. It's one of those where we would like to say, oh yeah, I would totally make the decision. It's when you make that decision, it's a tough one, I'm sure.
You kind of wonder if they converted.
Right.
Would they really think that they converted?
They probably watch it pretty close.
Under close revenge.
Yeah. To a certain extent, but there's an element to this radical Islam thought that it's all about conversion and there's not really discipleship in Islam. In the same way that there is in Christianity. So a common practice for conversion is to take a young woman and marry her to an Islamic man who then has his way with her. And he can throw her to the side of the street the next day, but because she has been married to an Islamic man, she's now Islamic. And there are many, many, many cases of these women who then are just rejected by this Islamic community that has kidnapped her and raped her and now say, okay, well, we're done with you. You've been converted. She tries to go back to her family, and if she's not Christian, because she's now sullied. So conversion is the important part, not necessarily even the same things that we do. Sometimes it's just check. I've converted you.
Yeah, but sometimes you have to be able to quote some verses of the Quran.
Sure.
And,
I'm sure that would be better. Right, because there's also elements, especially within the Islamic State, where they'll take people who are absolutely professing Muslims, and they can quote the Quran up and down, but if they don't have the same view of Sharia, well, you're just as useless as all the other infidels. So yeah. Anyways,
I wouldn't have to say.
no, I don't think I would. All right. So there's the yucky stuff. Let's move on to some little bit happier stuff. Philippians 2, chapter 1 through 11. Someone like to look that up.
I've got it.
All right.
Therefore, if you have any encouragement from being united with Christ, if any comfort from his love, if any common sharing in the Spirit, if any tenderness and compassion, to make my joy complete by being like-minded, having the same love, being one in spirit and of one mind. Do nothing out of selfish ambition or vain conceit. Rather, in humility, value others above yourselves, not looking to your own interest, but each of you to the interest of others. In your relationships with one another, have the same mindset as Jesus Christ, who being in very nature God, did not consider equality with God to his own advantage. Rather, he made himself nothing by making the very nature of a servant, being made in human likeness and being found in appearance as a man. He humbled himself by being obedient to death, even death on the cross. Therefore, God exalted him to the highest place and gave him the name that is above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee shall bow in heaven and on earth and under the earth, and every tongue acknowledge that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father.
So one of the gentlemen kind of made reference to this. What does the doctrine of the incarnation have to say to these persecuted Christians? So what does the doctrine of the incarnation, the fact that Jesus, though he was of the same substance as God, emptied himself and became a slave and obedient to death, even death on the cross. What?
That would have that he understands because he's been there.
Right. He is our suffering Savior. And he was willing to suffer for us. And from some of them, they seem to have this idea, this understanding that they are choosing suffering by continuing to claim to be Christian. And that suffering is almost suffering with Christ. That what they're doing is better than just being in that same place that they were, having all the life that they had, equality perhaps with their neighbors. They just decided to suffer. There were some notes about an interesting change within the Muslim population. I might talk about this more as well. Did you notice that?
We were much more susceptible and receptive to the word of God to Jesus than they had been before.
Yeah.
And they saw the people suffering and he smiled.
Mm-hmm. So there's one reason that they're seeing these people who are suffering, who are refugees, and yet somehow the way that they are living is different still. Their children are smiling. It's an interesting thing that they're seeing sort of that Christian virtue. Do you think there's maybe anything else that's going on as well?
I think they're finding unity and more of them doing this together and stronger for it.
Right, and they're becoming these tight-knit little groups and communities. And we know something amazing, especially about Christian communities, those tight-knit, good, great Christian communities that are under pressure and under persecution. There's something about them that people just want to be a part of. And so they're finding that people are much more interested in finding out what they're doing.
So what's going on with ISIS? Is that what's drawing people to ISIS? What is it that's making people want to be interested in ISIS? Even in
ISIS?
Oh, because they're afraid of ISIS.
Yeah.
But you
Right.
hear about people in
Well, yeah. Oh, absolutely. Right. So
biggest thing I don't understand about that is how she woman wants to be connected with us.
we were traveling around and we saw a very moderate Muslim family. And the guy comes out and he was dressed just exactly the same way I was. He had shorts, he had a t-shirt. It's a hot day. Go to the gas station. Blah 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 blah. His wife gets out and she is in it wasn't a full burqa, but she definitely had the headscarf and all this sort of stuff. I thought the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right. Wow. Beats me. I may be able to touch the surface of your question.
All right.
Right.
They're here in the
What?
United States,
Yeah.
and I saw them up at the outlet stores, total from head to toe.
Sure.
You couldn't see any skin.
Right.
And it was hot.
Yeah.
And
Now-
I thought, they're here, why don't you go by how we dress?
Well, and there are some important reasons why they do that. Is modesty. Part of it is kind of tied up in this sort of women as possession, which is very problematic, I think. But looking at it very charitably, modesty and saving yourself and all that sort of stuff.
Can't afford grapes, so we gotta keep it kind of wrapped up.
Well, there you go. Why do people join ISIS?
Yeah. They've turned so
From what
many
we
people
can,
away.
from what we can, just looking at it broad stroke, you've got the people who are there, and a lot of that is endangerment. Either join us or die. And a lot of people go, well, I'm going to join you. Okay, fine. A lot of it is kind of an idea of reparation. Let's get them back. That's part of it. They believe that they go back to Sykes-Picot and the splitting up in all of these different nations. So during the time of Lawrence of Arabia, Lawrence goes in and tries to convince the Bedouin tribes to join them during World War I. Right, one? Yeah, great. During World War I. And he was doing a really good job. Meanwhile, there was an Englishman and a Frenchman, Sykes and Picot, who decided, hey, what would be a really great idea is if we split all of these little tribes up into little nations so that they can't be one big group anymore. Meanwhile, Lawrence is saying, hey, guess what? If you join our side, we will let you have a nation back. Because they were all remembering back to the Turkish Empire. We had an empire. And it was great. It was wonderful. Yeah, we fought within ourselves, yes. But we had a land and we had unity. So Lawrence is promising them unity. Meanwhile, Sykes-Picot is cut them up into little nation states that only a strong man could possibly rule because there's too many warring tribes in it. And ultimately, Sykes-Picot won. And so that's why we have Iraq and Iran and all of these little states. So a lot of it is people are looking back and saying, we used to have the Turkish Empire. We used to be, this great superpower of the world, and now we have goats. We need to do something. So they want to take over. a lot of it is this religious side, that we should be this great religious force. Part of ISIS is they do literally believe. I'm not going to get too far into this. They believe that they are. Okay, so when we talked about Revelation, I talked about, in Revelation there's this great battle at the end of all things. The Quran says something very, very similar. What's very interesting is that, especially ISIS's understanding of it, is they are that army that is bringing about the end of the world. What higher, more noble thing could you possibly do but to bring about the coming of the 13th Imam, basically their savior, to come back and restore all things. And what they need to do is bring chaos and bring destruction and bring death, because only through chaos and destruction and death will the 13th Imam come back. So there's this huge apocalyptic sort of huge side to this. And they're really, really good at recruiting. So yeah, loner kids in Michigan find their way onto a website, and they see all these great YouTube videos, and they see all these great interesting things about how life should be and all this sort of stuff, and they decide to join up, and folks are very happy to give them all sorts of instructions on explosive devices that they can use. Yeah, so there's this huge cultural sort of thing. So there are people who are flocking to ISIS and sending money. There are people who are flocking from it to the reception of the gospel. One of the things they suggest in another one of these videos, may get to or may not, is that a lot of the more kind of moderate Muslims in the area, and moderate Muslims in that area are totally different from moderate Muslims here, but aren't, we're going to kill you right away, but moderate Muslims are almost ashamed of what is being done in the name of Allah. And so they start hearing these other people, and they go, out, because these people don't act the way that our people are acting. So there's an interesting reception to the gospel in that. Sacrifice. How much do you think about sacrifice in terms of your own faith? Right? Because we're not asked to sacrifice all that much. Sure, we hand out the offering plate on Sunday morning. We give you a sign-up sheet. By the way, there's a sign-up sheet for the Springwater Festival. Sorry. Right? Yeah. Yeah. And there's a certain extent to which that is correct. But we also conveniently forget some other stuff. Romans 12. I appeal to you, therefore, summing up chapters 1 through 11, brothers and sisters, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. Do not be conformed to this world or the present state of being, but be transformed by the renewing of your minds, so that you may discern what is the will of God, what is good and acceptable and perfect. We may not be asked to literally stand up and be beheaded, but we are asked to sacrifice our lives, and that's what we're supposed to be doing in worship. We're to sacrifice ourselves to Christ, to put ourselves under Christ's lordship, to say, I'm not in charge, you are. And that's a hard thing to do. So the last question is, would they write the noon on your door, your wall, or your business? Put it a different way. If it became illegal to be a Christian, would anyone be able to find enough evidence to convict you? But there's a second question that these people have to ask as well. Am I willing to say that I am in? Am I willing to, by my life, continue to against myself? It's one thing to go up to that point and say, okay, yeah, that was great up to now, and now I'm gonna be kind of gonna be secret. I'm not gonna be that outspoken. Or do you keep speaking? Or like the young man, actually do more? He fled from Iran. Work. Would you be willing, in this instance, to offer up your own life, to offer up your family life, offer up your comfort, your possessions? Would you be willing to leave everything behind for Jesus Christ? What's your right?
The video.
Oh, I'm sorry. No, it's fine.
They made a big point about the difference between sacrifice and what was the other one?
Oh, yeah.
The difference between sacrifice and what? Was it death?
Something like just giving up. Or
I need to know that word.
we'll go back and find. But yeah, there is a difference between just loss. I think maybe it was. There's a difference between just loss. I'm just going to lose this, and I'm going to sacrifice it.
Right. I thought that was a good point.
Right. It's like this. There's a difference between the government coming and saying we're going to take X number of your dollars in taxes, and I'm going to give X number of my dollars. There's a difference between the two. So these people, yes, lost everything that they had. But in their minds, they sacrificed. I'm going to lay down this stuff. And then there's an assumed gain. In case we don't get to, I hope to talk more about this, but I'll do some more research about Voice of the Martyrs, but it seems like they're doing a lot of work. Another great organization that's working in the area is the Nazarene Project. And what they are doing specifically is they are taking whole communities, whole churches and towns that are in these refugee camps, and they're finding places in other countries, in other towns, for them to be relocated to, so that they can all go come together as church communities. All right, let's close in prayer. Lord God, thank you for this day. Thank you for the witness of these who are under such persecution, and yet strongly stay faithful to your name. Lord, build us up in our faith. Face such overwhelming dangers that you might teach us how to sacrifice. You might teach us how we might learn your humility, that we might empty ourselves, that we might submit every part of our life to your lordship. Lord God, give your hedge of protection around these people, around the organizations and the individuals and the groups that are seeking to protect them and to aid them. Lord God, we thank you for something unprecedented among the Muslim population receiving Christ. Lord God, we lift all of this up into your hands and ask that you show us how we might be your people in this place. We pray these things in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord.